Hey everyone, welcome to Wildlife Inspired. This is your channel for photography, for wildlife, and for wildlife photography. I'm your host, Scott Keys, and today we're going to talk about insurance. And why am I talking about insurance? Well, I just smashed a $13,000 lens. I'll tell you all about it right after this. Now in today's video, we're going to talk about insurance. Photography insurance is actually one of the most common questions I get. And in this case, I'm actually filing a claim through my insurance company. I thought, what a great time to make a video. I did a little bit of research. I did some polls out to the public to find out what they were paying. And I surmised all that. I think you're going to find this one really, really helpful as we talk about photography insurance. I'm not an expert in insurance, but what I can tell you is my own personal experiences. And I can also share a lot of information from others to give you an idea of what you're going to get when you insure your equipment, how much should you expect to pay, what's covered, what's not covered. We're going to get into all of that in this video. But a couple weeks ago, I was out in the field. I was moving my tripod from one area to the other, and the tripod fell. My lens hit the ground. I heard the noise. I couldn't look at it. I had my Z9, my Nikon Z9, and my 400 millimeter 2.8, which is running around $13,000. And I couldn't bear to look at my lens. I finally picked it up, and it was clearly not going to work. It was actually split. I show you a picture of what that damage looked like. My stomach sunk. One of the first things I thought about was, how am I going to afford this? Is my insurance going to cover this? I have never filed a claim with this specific insurance company. Now, over the years, I've been doing this 11 years. I think I filed 3 claims through different processes. I'm going to explain some of those processes in this video. But in this case, it was a new insurance company, and I wasn't sure if they were going to cover that claim. I'll let you know at the end what the result was. Was it a happy ending? I'll let you know in just a minute. But I wanted to, in this process, gather some information from others and just talk about insurance in general. So what I did is I reached out to Instagram. Now, one of the great things that I have is an audience on Instagram that's engaged. So when I want information, when I want a pulse check, when I want to just reach out and say, like, what are you doing? What's your experiences? It allows me to reach an audience, sometimes several thousand people, and look through those results and try to pull them together. And here's what I did. I looked at, what do you insure? What is the value of your insurance? And what does that cost you on an annual basis? And this went all over the place. So there's a few things that we're going to talk about in this video. We're going to talk about what to consider when purchasing insurance. And then we're going to talk about the cost of what you can expect to pay based on what you get. So let's just talk about what to consider. There's a few, I'm going to break this into 2 general categories. And again, I'm not an insurance person. I tried to read my policy head to toe. Man, that thing is tough. But here's what I want you to consider when you're looking at insurance. 1, what are your needs? Are you a pro or are you an amateur? So if you're making money as this, that might change the whole game for you. Some of your policies are not going to let you insure your equipment if you're a professional. Some will. There's 2 types of policies I'm going to break into this. I'm going to call it private insurance, where you're going out specifically to a company and acquiring insurance just for photography. And then I'll call these rider policies. A rider policy might be something that you attach to an existing policy, normally a homeowner's or even renter's insurance. So you've got a homeowner's insurance policy. You're not a professional. The first thing I would actually do is contact my agent and say what options are out there. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Obviously, we want to talk about price. That's going to be a big deal. So we're going to get into that in just a minute. But another thing to consider is what is covered. So a few things around this idea of coverage. You want to know what the deductibles are. Some policies will have a 0 deductible. That's best case. Others might have a low deductible, $50 or $100. Some of them may be a high deductible, $200, $300, $500. That is important to know, because if you've ever dealt with insurance, you know that deductibles and premiums being what you pay monthly or annually, are often related. The lower the premium, often case, just like medical coverage, the higher the deductible. So you can play those numbers games sometimes. I will tell you, insurance is like the house. At the end of the day, insurance is always going to win, or else it wouldn't exist as a business. But you can play around with some of that to see what suits you best. Depreciation can be part of this. Some policies will be full replacement value, meaning I smashed my Nikon lens. If my policy offers full replacement, they will send me the amount to purchase a new one. That's best case scenario. Other policies may have a depreciation value. There may be different terminology for this. I'm just going to use the term depreciation value. This means they're going to give me back the amount of money it's worth as a used product. So instead of getting that $13,000 check to replace my lens, maybe it's only going to be 8 or 10, depending on the age of the lens. So important to note that as well. A couple other considerations here. Theft. Is my policy covering theft? Is it going to exclude travel, or do I need to think about travel insurance as a supplement to supplement what I have? Liability. What does it cover if it breaks? Drops, cold weather, water. You really want to know that, especially if you're a wildlife photographer or any photographer that's really tough on gear. The worst thing that could happen is you submit a claim and they say, I'm sorry, we don't cover that. So you really want to be specific with what type of event is going to be covered. There are legal fees that can be involved, and this is normally when you get to the professional level. You may be looking at insurance that helps you cover legal fees if you're sued or damage to other people or other people's property. Now, this again is a little bit more geared when you're dealing with the professional insurances, but as a professional photographer, those are certainly considerations. If my client gets hurt, will this policy cover me? If there's injury to them or their equipment, will this policy cover me? And if I have or I incur legal fees, will this policy help me out? So you really need to be specific about your needs. And I would always start with, am I a pro or am I an amateur? And if I'm an amateur, my first course of action would normally be to look at my own existing insurance. Now, I told you I did some study because price is obviously the big one here. And I looked at what is the gear you're insuring and how much do you pay? And this ranged. This went from about $10,000 of gear at an annual cost of somewhere around $100 up to, I had a client, I'm looking at my numbers here, $50,000 at as much as $1,500 a year. Now those policies can be a little bit different. So most of these I asked for just the price of the equipment policy, not including the liability. I talked about the professional coverage, the legal fees. If you're just insuring physical equipment, what's it going to cost? So I ran all of these numbers together. I got about 50 responses. I did some averages. The average amount insured was actually over $20,000, and the average price a year was $400. And this is a good range. If you're not going to take away much else from this video, here's what I want you to think about. On average, what you can expect to pay for insurance is 1 to 3% of the value of your equipment. And that will range. The lowest I had was somebody paying about 1%. So for about $10,000 a year, they were only paying about $100 a year. Seems pretty reasonable. On the high end, I had somebody that was insuring about $20,000 a year and paying over $600. So over 3%. There was actually some paying even more than that. But on these average, if I take out the outliers, that's about the range I came into. The reason I want you to know those numbers is if you are being insured for the cost of your equipment, that's the range you should be looking in. Now, what is most important is not the cost of the policy, as anybody who has dealt with insurance will tell you. What really matters is when it happens, is what I get back satisfactory? Did I get what I paid for? If you are really struggling to get payment, if you're having to defend your payments, if you're getting not full value for the equipment, all of those things come into play. If I'm on the 1% side, my coverage could be a little bit light. But if I have a low policy, if a low deductible or a low premium, if I'm only paying $100 a year for $10,000 worth of gear, and I don't have a deductible, and I'm getting full replacement value, and my insurance agent's easy to deal with, and my claim got processed fast, man, I am feeling absolutely terrific about my insurance. That is a best case scenario. But if I got all of that, if I got what I wanted, and I was paying 2 or 3%, I'd probably still be pretty happy with it. So again, that 1% range, that really nice, ideal, low cost range, if it came with all of the headaches, if I didn't get full replacement value, if I had to defend my claim, or worse yet, got it rejected, it's no good. So the policy itself and who is offering that policy to you matters a whole lot. So that's the range. We talked about that 1 to 3% on average. I will tell you this, a lot of people don't insure their equipment. So while I said the average for my analysis here was around $23,000 worth of gear, that sounds really high. You also have to remember, this was only given or provided from people who had insurance. People with only $2,000 or $3,000 worth of total gear, they probably don't insure their stuff. Not that they shouldn't, but they normally just don't find the need to do it. So when I got this data, it is going to be skewed for people that have a lot of equipment because they are concerned about breakage and they are going to want a policy. Those are some of the considerations. I'm going to list kind of my considerations up here, but let's just start with the price. These are the averages that I came up with. This is the guideline. Again, these not set in stone, but this is the guideline. What you want to consider over here can often be more important than the price you pay. And at the end of the day, you got to have a happy ending. To that extent, let me finish my story. I submitted my lens to Nikon for an evaluation, and every camera company is a little bit different, but they ask up front what happened. I checked the box for damage, impact damage. That's the best category I could find. The lens, by the way, was fine. So the glass, I should say, was fine. What I believe happened is internally it buckled, and everything inside there, so you've got lens stabilization, you've got focusing motors, there's all kinds of gizmos inside these lenses. My guess is that's where the damage was. I checked the box, they said estimate's gonna be about $900. I instantly submitted to my insurance company, they get back to me and they say, no big deal, we'll take care of it. By the way, I'm gonna mention a few insurance companies to look at the end of the video. My insurance company is called PPA. This is not an infomercial. So I'm not gonna, it's my experience, I'll tell you my experience, but I'm not gonna tell you a ton about these companies because I don't want you to be swayed to one company or another. Your experience could be different than mine. I am considered now a professional photographer, so I needed professional photography coverage. This was a company I chose 2 years ago. This was my first claim. The company said, we're good, $900, we're gonna send you a check. My response, hang on a second, I don't know the actual damage. I'm sending it to them. They're estimating $900. Don't know what it's actually gonna cost. They said, no problem, we're gonna send you the $900. If it's more or less, we'll figure it out. They sent me the check. In the meantime, Nikon sends the lens back. I'm thinking it's repaired for the $900. I get it out. It doesn't work. It's still not working, and I'm really, really frustrated. I dig in the box, I pull out a letter, and the letter says, there's nothing we can do. It's beyond the impact damage estimate, and the lens is totaled. And now I'm fearful. My insurance company has already given me the $900. I now have to tell them, no, it's totaled. And in that process, I had to send them some paperwork. The next step, and they were pretty good. We went back and forth a little bit about the type of damage, and I had to provide some documentation. As expected, took a couple days. They finally got back to me and said, we're gonna send you now the value, the depreciation type value, under the condition that if you replace the lens, we will give you the full replacement. This sounded pretty fair to me. So in other words, what they were saying is, we're not just gonna give you the brand new cost, the $13,000, we're gonna send you an additional, I think it was $8,000. That covers you if you buy a different thing. So if you go out and buy new camera equipment, we're not gonna buy, or we're not gonna pay for the replacement value. I then ordered the new lens from B&H, my partners at B&H. I submitted that bill or that receipt to them. They sent me the final check for the balance. Happy ending for me. So this story worked out pretty well. My personal coverage, I'm gonna tell you ballpark what my coverage cost me. I gave you some of the averages for the general public. As a professional coverage, I need to be concerned with liability, meaning a client gets hurt or injured. I have that coverage. It's going to cover my equipment cost up to $15,000, I think, on my policy. It's going to cover certain other aspects that a professional photographer might run into, including things like legal fees. So I pay, I think I'm going to estimate $428 is what I paid last year for that coverage. Now, it's a lot, $400 When I did my calculation, I said about 1%. $15,000, I should expect 150 to 450 to be my insurance payment. So I'm at that higher range, but very importantly, it includes the liability. Most of that other coverage is not going to include liability. So again, that's the range you should be looking at. I will tell you, if you're paying an annual fee of more than 3% of your equipment cost and you're not getting any other coverage like liability, legal fees, those other things, I would reevaluate that policy. There are a few companies, by the way, that offer professional photographer equipment. I use PPA, that's the Professional Photographers Association. There are several others. I'm going to list them here because, again, this is not a sponsored video. It's not an infomercial. I just wanted to show you some of the others. So let me list that here. So you can see over here, in addition to the company I'm using, PPA, there are several organizations that do it. I'm not going to get into every one. I'll list a few of the ones that are most popular that I have heard about other people using, including things like NANPA and Pro Photographers Insurance. Next is another one. There's some other ones here as well. When I looked at my research, what I found is when people were choosing insurance, of that 50 that submitted answers to me, about half of them were riders to existing policies, indicating to me that they're probably not professional photographers. And it gets a little tricky in there. Some insurance companies are not going to accept professional photographers on a rider policy. There's a policy called a marine rider policy. That's what I used to have with my first company. So before I technically was a professional photographer, I used my homeowner's insurance. I had a rider for that. It was a little bit cheaper. It did not cover liability. And I wanted to make sure it covered, though, damage to equipment and theft. I put in 2 claims from 2 homeowners insurance policies that were both rider policies. About half of the people that got back to me, that's what they were doing. The other half, and they were using various companies. The companies that came up a lot were USAA and State Farm. I don't know if they're just because they're more popular in general, so more people have them, but those were the most common. The other 50% used a combination of various third-party insurers, meaning it wasn't done through a homeowner's policy. They went out and sought a policy through, again, one of these other organizations that offers them. And there's a lot of them. I'm not endorsing any of them. I'm giving you my experience. I can tell you, having used PPA, I will continue to renew that. I will tell you, and I didn't want to play a game with them like, hey, if you give me a hard time with this claim, I'm going to go badmouth you. I resisted the urge to do that. What I want to tell you is they came through and I will personally renew with them. This is, again, I have to say that this is not a paid endorsement. I'm getting zero. They don't even know I'm making this video. So I am happy with that service. I would reserve the right, if it happened again and they declined it or I had a hard time, to look at this again. But my first and only experience with them was positive. That's the only endorsement I can give. My other experiences were also positive. They were through companies, again, like private insurance, home insurance, Progressive, companies nationwide, companies like that I had dealt with in the past. Actually, I've never had a hard time with one of these claims, and I'm hoping that streak continues. So that's my video for you today. What I really want to do with these is down in the comments, share some experiences, good and bad. One of the values of these videos, especially a video like this, is to get experiences so that others searching this out, I know there are going to be people looking at insurance. I know this video is going to flag when they type in photography insurance or wildlife photography insurance. I know this video is going to come up and they're going to look for some answers. We don't always have exact answers, but we can share experiences, and that's really, really valuable. Word of mouth is the most valuable tool for most consumers. And so if you've got some experiences, put them down in the comments and let others know your personal experiences, good or bad. Now, if you're not subscribed to the channel, I need you to hit the subscribe button. There's a lot of playlists down there. You're going to find a playlist for you, whether you're a wildlife photographer or just beginning in photography in general. There's going to be a playlist down there. You got to hit the bell for notifications. That lets you know when I have a new video out. Hit the like button so this content can get pushed out to like-minded individuals. And as always, I hope we can continue to find inspiration in wildlife together.